All right, here we go with the Public Square, although the title of the program seems to be a working title at this point, being worked on even as we come on the air here, Dave. That's the impression I get.
With Here We Go Again, as if last week's broadcast wasn't contrarian enough, let's start with another one. That is, what did we say this was? The election no one is paying attention to, or the election no one is watching. Right now, the whole world, Wayne, is absorbed with what happened at the debate. And of course, that's the way it's going to be. So once again, like the little tiny ant crawling up the hill, the Public Square Media Network will go completely contrarian against the tide and say there are things that are very, very important that we're forgetting about because we're all focused on just one thing. And we want to talk today about some of the other things that are happening out there in ballot land, where people are really voting that are going to have tremendous impact on the life of our nation. In some cases, lasting longer than whoever the next president's going to be.
True. All right. Well, this is going to be interesting, I think. And this is kind of right up the middle of who we are, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, because not coming at this from a party perspective, not coming at this defining reality based on who's at the top of anybody's ticket, but coming at this from the perspective that civil government is something that has been given to us by the Creator, and we have an obligation and responsibility to do civil government in a way that reflects the nature of God's revelation. We have a responsibility. If we're going to claim to be people of faith, then that faith should inform what we do politically, and that means we should be looking at consequences. And there's a lot of consequences, a lot of consequential things going on right now.
All right, let me do my job and introduce everybody who's here in the conversation today. That, of course, is Dave Zanotti, and I'm Wayne Shepherd. Dr. Jeff Sanders is here, Melanie Else is here, Rob Walgate, and our producer is here, as always, Alan C. Duncan. That is the team, and the topic has been announced, so where do we begin?
Rob, Wayne said he was doing his job. I thought he was just volunteering here. So, Alan, does he? I just thought he came along every week because he loved this.
He's just the eye candy in the room.
the ear candy.
Yeah, that's it. The ear candy.
Just the ear candy. For those of you that are brand new listeners,
I'm going to put that on my business card. I'm going to put that on my business card, Jeff.
We can jest with him because we've known him for so long. But those of you may be surprised who don't know this broadcast will have known his voice for so long, too. So we do recognize that we have a legend as a part of the table every single week here on the Public Square that he's available. So, Wayne, please.
Sometimes I'll do voicemail for different businesses, and got to make some money along the way somewhere. And a friend of mine called the other day and said, "Are you that?" I said, "Yeah, that's me."
Are we allowed to say any of them? I mean, it's maybe a contract disclosure. We can't say where.
Well, that particular one was Medicare.
Okay, that was the one I thought it was. Yes. So if you can imagine the voice of Medicare.
I do a lot of banks and different businesses, but Medicare has been the one that.
If you weren't happy enough when you had to call Medicare,
and what's ironic is in talking about healthcare for generations now, we've been actually experiencing the reality that a lot of people today would rate Medicare as perhaps the only government program that seems to have some degree of workability. So, Wayne, at least you got the good one. I mean, you got that contract's probably going to be around for a while.
Yeah. Here's my mistake, though. I should have charged them a penny per call.
You could have charged them a tenth of a penny per call.
Be raking it in.
And I could have volunteered here with the Public Square.
Well, well, the fact of the matter is that for all intents and purposes, folks, he does volunteer for the Public Square and has since 2007. And I can assure you that if for some reason there was never a dollar to pay for an expense here, Wayne would be the last person who would leave. Well, anyhow, I'm sorry for taking us down that rabbit hole, Wayne. But for those,
we're off track.
Those people who don't know, let's get back to
the election that nobody's watching.
The election that nobody's watching. So let's talk about it. And it starts with ballot issues. Okay, Melanie and Rob are responsible for iVoters.com. And iVoters.com is a 50-state online voter information site that is fast, secure, free, and not nosy. We do not in any way, shape, or form take information from you, retain it, and sell it. That's not what we're about. We don't even know your name. You come on iVoters, you put in your address so that you can get a personalized ballot that matches what you'll see at the polls. And that's the only information that's there, and which means, in essence, it's worthless when you're gone. So we set it up that way so that you can't be recruited from participating in iVoters.com. It's also nonpartisan. We take no money from candidates, no money from political parties, and the truth of the matter is most of the people who monetize their involvement in politics, tying together our earlier theme, the people who are looking to get paid to do this kind of work despise this site because we don't monetize it. What I mean by that is we don't sell it. We don't sell the information to other people, and we don't go out and get people to subscribe to it. We don't ask people to support it. Or now, we do invite people to support the work so that it can be offered freely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very different model. It's a very different model.
In other words, we're setting a bad example for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no ads to maneuver around or to click off of.
Yes, and there's no committees that are ranking candidates for you. And you have to trust people who you don't know to tell you where somebody stands. At iVoters, the candidates speak for themselves. And if we do have outside agencies, and we do, what we do is we publish organizations left and right who endorse and let you get the read on who that person that's running for state rep, whose name you probably don't even know. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just hard keeping up with all this stuff. Now you find out who they are, and you say, okay, they're endorsed by XYZ, and this one's endorsed by ABC. That's a pretty darn good way. In fact, Melanie, that's one of your favorite spots at iVoters.
It's an overlooked spot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people will breeze right through that. But if you can, from my own experience, if I go to a particular organization and I see who's being endorsed in my area, I know who, if it's an organization I disagree with, I know who not to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
That is just as valuable as going to an organization you trust, who you agree with in principle, to see who they're recommending. Sometimes if they're not recommending somebody, you overlook the other names. It's so important to see where that money is flowing from private organizations and endorsements.
So that's a part of iVoters, but iVoters also puts a big emphasis on ballot issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I would contend that the theme of today's broadcast is watch out, the ballot issues can get you. And in fact, the ballot issues and the changes that are being brought forth onto the ballots, not just by citizen initiatives now, but by legislative action as well. This isn't just a tirade about citizen initiatives. That's not the point. The point is it doesn't matter how it got on the ballot. Some states permit citizen-initiated statutes or amendments. Others do not. But whether it came to you by the legislature or by the work of citizens in some states, the fact is these ballot issues will be around much longer than the next president. So, Rob, what are they, or where do we start?
Well, right now, if you go to iVoters.com, you'll be able to click on and see the abortion issues that are on different state ballots across the country.
How many is it? Are there
I think
eight?
There's eight.
Yeah.
There's 8 of those. And you'll be able to look at the exact language. You'll be able to look at maybe who's supporting them, get a read on what the impact would be.
Primary sources will take you right to the official text or the official explanations so that you're not surprised by an element when you walk into the voter's booth.
Yeah, it goes much deeper than a 30-second commercial because I think 30-second commercials are going to be a bit misleading in what the language says,
Jeff, you think?
or what the intent,
all of them,
or what the intent is there. So it takes a little effort, takes a little time. You're going to do your homework and look through stuff, but all that information will be there right at your fingertips at iVoters.
Like, for example, in Nebraska, there may end up being 2 different abortion amendments on the ballot. One that's a 24-week restriction and one that's a 12-week restriction. Now, they're not all finished with the process, but by the time we get to voting, there could very well be 2.
Yes, and how many times through the years have you seen instances such as that where a vote yes means yes, a vote no means no, or a vote yes means no, or does a vote no mean yes, or how does this look? What does it look like?
Well, that's the first thing that people ask us when they're facing a ballot issue. Is yes mean yes or yes mean no?
I think sometimes people write those ballot initiatives on purpose just to confuse people. And it works, by the way.
Yeah, it does. And because the statistics show that people are more prone to vote no on a ballot issue than yes, because they don't want to make a mistake. So if you can get yes to mean no, I'm sorry, that's a trade secret. We let that out, didn't we?
Well, and I also think they try and do it to confuse people or to make it rough so that then people will be disgruntled and say, this is why we shouldn't have ballot issues, because look at what happens when we have ballot issues. No. That's not the answer either, because all that does is empower the politicians.
Yeah, and we have to be careful because there are people who are upset about citizen-initiated statutes, and I understand being upset with that. I'm actually slowly coming to the position that maybe citizen-initiated statutes should be eliminated altogether. I'm not there yet.
Wow.
But I understand the argument.
Statutes and amendments?
I would say constitutional amendments.
Okay.
I wouldn't say statutes.
Can we have a debate show about this
We
sometime?
could, probably when this election's over.
Okay.
Only because our civic IQ is diminishing so quickly in our culture.
Well, that's a fact.
That it's unfair to voters when special interests come out and throw a sophisticated proposal at them in regards to constitutional reality. And then it puts the burden upon independent people like us to have to go out and try and train them. And we've got like $40,000 to do it against a special interest that's got $40 million. I can understand why some people are beginning to think maybe that era in our culture is gone. But in the meantime, we've got ballot issues on 8 states at least we've got to talk about.
Let me take a break here, and we'll come back and talk more. By the way, we've already touched on something important about iVoters. We go to iVoters to learn about these ballot issues in our area that we will be voting on, but we also learn about these ballot issues around the country for information and our support. We can't vote for them, but we can certainly support the efforts. So that's an added benefit of iVoters. We'll be back on the Public Square coming up.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Let's jump back into the conversation here about the election that nobody's watching. It's our title of the program here today. Jeff, you were about to speak before the break.
Well, I was actually going to debate Dave before the debate because if we're talking about ballot initiatives and maybe the civic intelligence is dropping, are the legislators any more intelligent than the citizen, the person in the pew?
Boy, you talk about setting somebody up.
I would say no, they're not.
Okay, well, thank you for answering your own question and taking me off the hook because there was a real trapdoor in that question.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to postpone that for future conversation, except to want to bring people into this conversation who already are predisposed to be upset about ballot issues. I understand. We understand. We've got a great depth of experience in this. But let's go back to the ballot issues that are concerning. So we know that the political campaigns right now at the top of the ticket are dominating their conversations with the abortion question. And of course, that's only going to be accelerated in states. And there's a good logic to say that perhaps these ballot issues in some of these states are being driven by a desire to use abortion as a wedge issue in that state. Now, whether there's an issue in the state or what's just being talked about, it's crystal clear that abortion is a wedge issue. There's just no doubt about it. It's being used by both campaigns, but particularly by Democrat campaigns right now, because they think they have the upper hand in regards to public sentiment. Now, it doesn't matter whether they've got the upper hand based on facts or based on feelings. They feel that they've got the upper hand. So abortion is a wedge issue. It will be on the ballot in 8 states.
And that number may grow as
It yet may grow.
Just so people understand that when they log on to iVoters next month, they may see more than 8.
Now, what they will also see is the one issue that I think is the sleeper, and that's the marijuana issue.
Mm-hmm.
That is up in how many places?
I believe it's in 6 states, and there's 7 issues because Nebraska has 2.
2 again.
Believe.
Yeah.
2 again. So yeah, it's in 6 states, and we know it's going to happen in more.
And some are medical marijuana, and some are recreational marijuana.
Can I set you up again with another question?
Jeff, Sanders, Dr. Sanders, playing the role of instigator.
He's the setup man today, yeah.
And if you could see the mischief glowing in his eyes.
Here's the windup and the pitch.
Yes, I start twirling my mustache even more. So, Dave, do you think that pastors should be discussing these issues from the pulpit and knowledgeably using iVoters? That's a double-barreled question.
Well, first off, knowledgeably and safely they can use iVoters.
Without getting in trouble with the IRS.
Yeah, and
because they're issues.
Right. First off, these are ballot issues, and that also makes a clear pathway for you in regards to federal election law, as well as, I believe, every state.
They're not endorsing a candidate. So
but Jeff, they can also share the iVoters link in bulletins or whatever format on the candidates because it's a nonpartisan site.
I will tell you that sharing the link in an email or whatever on the bulletin of the church is great, but it doesn't communicate as powerfully as a voice in the pulpit.
Oh, yeah, we've seen that over the years. I can remember.
People will not read that stuff.
Sure, Jeff, but we also have to remember from the pulpit, pastors are not limited to ballot issues. They can present iVoters on the candidates as well because it is nonpartisan.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say, and Jeff is saying this as a retired pastor.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You're not coming down on pastors
not at all.
some position of, because sometimes pastors, I'm the son of a pastor. Sometimes pastors don't like it when people who haven't ever been pastors tell pastors what to do. So
I did it. I did it for 31 years. So
so I'm just making that point for you.
So should pastors be talking about this
I
stuff?
would suggest some of the models that we've seen over the years. One of the best I've ever seen is David Youth, the senior pastor at First Baptist Orlando. I can remember a Sunday morning when he put the slide for iVoters behind him on that giant mega screen and stood there and said, let's talk about this. And this is why you want to visit this site and why we fully endorse this site. And it's in our bulletin, and we want to encourage all of you to go to ivoters.com.
God bless him.
Because this is a way to get a fair hearing. This doesn't have to provoke an argument. This is something you can do all by yourself. Or you can spread it as wide as you like in regards to information, but they are not going to tell you who to vote for, and this is not a Republican or a Democrat site. So this is an opportunity for all of us to practice responsible citizenship without getting into an argument. And I remember that. It was a big day. And so, there's a lot of pastors who do the same thing. Of course, the problem is not enough people know about it. But ballot issues may help them to know more about it because people are hungry for the information. Let's go back to marijuana. All right. Well, actually, let's go back to talking about marijuana is what I meant to say.
Right.
Hungry for information and marijuana.
I put away my gummies.
Yeah,
just for
which is really,
Yes.
and while it's a part of humor all over the country and all over the culture talking about this. It's something we inherited from the days of laughing.
Right.
I want to humbly submit. I have made as many jokes and laughed as many as anybody else, but I stopped dead in my tracks several months ago when a report came into our office from people that we know are telling the truth. We validated this story, and we're not going to go any farther than make it anonymous, but I can tell you that it's absolutely documented. When a couple came home or they were out for the evening and had a babysitter, they got a phone call and had to rush home to take their very young child to the emergency room because that child had ingested gummies from the babysitter's purse.
Oh,
the poor babysitter wasn't looking. The kid got into the purse, ate the marijuana gummies, THC, and was about in a coma. And they had to rush this child to the hospital at risk of the child's life. Fortunately, thanks be to God, the child recovered. The hospital was able to treat and was able to. And this is in a state. I believe this actually happened before Ohio legalized what they call recreational marijuana.
We now know the problems associated with legalized marijuana. We have states who have legalized it. We see the issues they're having, and yet more states are wanting to sign up for it. That's what amazes me.
And Wayne, what's remarkable is if you track back to some of our earliest conversations about this, we and many other people have said for years, watch this. And particularly black pastors have been onto this. They have been advising us for years. Watch what's going to happen. They'll start with the medicinal. They'll move to recreational. Then everyone will be growing it in their homes. You watch what's going to happen. Not everyone, but a lot of people will. Now, they have been absolutely, in fact, correct. In fact, in Florida, this is a big issue. This is going to be issue 3, I believe, on the Florida ballot. On marijuana legalization, Florida went from medicinal. Now they're going to, quote, recreational. And guess who's funding the ballot issue with tens of millions of dollars? The medical marijuana people.
Close to $80 million.
What a surprise.
And when we talked about that, when it came to medicinal marijuana back in the day, and said, just so people understand, if you approve medicinal marijuana, it's going to get to recreational. And people throw their hands in there and say, oh, always paranoia, always slippery slope. You guys are always making assumptions. We're like, listen, we're just saying, be prepared for it because it's inevitable. It has to happen. That's the way it works.
We are at the point, most people may not realize this, that in the neighborhood of 38 states have approved medicinal marijuana. In the neighborhood of 24 states have approved recreational.
Can I tell you what I saw in Montana 3 weeks ago? So we were on vacation at Glacier National Park, and we drove through 4 Indian reservations. We went through the Blackfoot, and then later the Flathead, and then later the Crow, and then later the Northern Cheyenne on our return trip. Every one of those reservations, all we saw, and there are many reasons for this, I'm sure, wretched poverty and devastation. Yet the only buildings in town that showed any kind of prosperity, and they were usually next door to each other, and there were dozens of them in even the small town of maybe 500 or 1,000 people, was the casino, and next door was the marijuana dispensary. So what's happening? There was no prosperity. There was no industry going on. People get their paychecks from wherever, and they spend it at the medical dispensary, and then they go gamble the rest of it away next door. How convenient. You think any of this was planned, maybe?
Both industries are predatory. My concern is the language and the marketing and the packaging. For years, we have said, get past the wrapping paper, look inside the box. So you've got, and I'll use Arkansas as an example, you've got the group that's promoting the ballot initiative is the Arkansans for Patient Access. That implies medical. And most of the language is about medical marijuana, but there is a provision that legalizes recreational. You wouldn't know
So
that.
they're saving the 2-step and just taking it all at one shot.
Yeah.
And they sneak it in there.
Right. It's contingent on federal descheduling, but it's still the camel's nose comes into the tent. But if you just look at the title or those who are promoting it, you wouldn't understand that. You've got to read the language. You've got to go to iVoters and actually look at the language.
So, and this is important for all across the country because you can see the acceleration of this. Now you say, well, it kind of sounds to me like all the horses are just about out of the barn. Aren't you all a little bit late to this discussion? No, we've been talking about it from the beginning. We're hoping that maybe people exhausted with listening to endless rhetorical commentary about the last debate, who are already bored but still care, would think maybe there's something else going on in this election that really matters. And there is, and these ballot issues are going to be around longer than the next president. And in some ways, what we do in this country on marijuana may impact more lives than the next president.
Let's talk more about these ballot issues, the election that nobody's watching, seemingly, coming up on this edition of The Public Square. If you joined us late, you can catch us from the beginning by going online to thepublicsquare.com, or even more conveniently, use the smartphone app free in your app store and listen to The Public Square that way. More coming up.
We will be right back for more on The Public Square.
All right, let's continue our conversation today in the Public Square with the team, which is Dave Zanotti, Melanie Elsey, Jeff Sanders, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan. I'm Wayne Shepherd. Let's go back to talking about these ballot issues.
Wayne, exemption time or disclaimer, perhaps time. I recognize that we're talking with no small amount of passion, beginning with me, about the question of marijuana. There's reason for that. I don't like stuff that gets kids hooked. Just don't like it. And having lived through the 60s and 70s, when marijuana was kind of like bottled water compared to the stuff that people are using now, I knew how many friends that I grew up with, that whole reality became a portal onto other things that resulted in prison, death, or deformed children down the road. And I'm not saying marijuana does all that. I'm saying that's where it started. And had they not had the first step, would they have ever found the second? This is a real life experience.
It's that generation of people that are approving these ballot measures across the country.
Come on, that's where the disclaimer was going to come to.
It's not a victimless crime.
But
folks.
hang on, he's about to say it. It's the boomers.
It's the boomers. I'll tell you this. The first time I realized it, so this would have been roughly 24, 25 years ago. I was in my early 20s. I really enjoyed listening to James Taylor music. I've seen him live in concert numerous times. I won't listen to his political lectures, but I enjoy his music. Mm-hmm. And I'm there in my early 20s with a friend.
Slowly getting high.
And all of a sudden, I'm like, but we had great seats. We were down low with all these people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'm not in the lawn. I'm down low, and I'm like,
smoke.
I'm like, someone's smoking weed. And I'm like looking around, and I look at my friend, and she goes, "It's all the old people." And I'm like, "What?" And we're looking, and so this would have been what, late 90s. It's all the older people around us now that are my age now, and they're all smoking weed. And I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, what? I thought only my friends did this. What are they doing? But that's what it was. And these are the folks now that are approving ballot measures all across the country. It's not the kids doing it. The kids in Ohio didn't get out and vote in 2023 in an off election year to approve recreational marijuana. It was people over the age of 40. That's who voted to approve it.
Yeah, probably over the age of 50, if you really want to know the truth. And
don't let anybody ever tell you that it is a victimless crime. My brother started, and he's dead now. My brother started smoking marijuana when he was 14. And his brain and maturity level never advanced beyond that. And he went on to some other drugs, but it always came back to marijuana. And he just settled in that. And it destroyed his ambition. It destroyed his brain. He, among all of my siblings, had the math brain of my mother. He could have gone on to have been so successful, and he did not.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jeff. Dave, you passed around a New York Times piece that brings up some scary things to go along with what Jeff said. Now, these gummies that you buy might be laced with something that you don't even intend to buy. This New York Times piece details these ostensibly weed gummies that lots of people I know take them, but they might contain psychedelic agents mixed within them. These might have psilocybin that is lacing them, and you didn't know it.
Alan, should it make me nervous that you know how to pronounce psilocybin?
Well, I listen to too much Joe Rogan, so
okay.
It's from mushrooms, isn't it?
Yes, it's the shroom stuff. Yeah.
It is. And so someone might be thinking they're buying marijuana or THC, and it's laced with these other things that's going to make them go out of their mind in some cases, and they didn't expect this. And this is something that this New York Times piece details.
So I was just trying to make the confession early out that this is a problem that older people have. Primarily, this is something that the boomers, I don't know why. I don't know if this is the people that never got out of high school in their own minds. I don't know if they're trying to relive their Levi's and Army dungaree days. So I don't know what they're trying to reenact or run away from. But one thing is an absolute certainty. This is something that the boomers are thinking that they're entitled to. That's the feeling. Like, if I want to get high and I want to get stoned, leave me the blank alone, because I'm going to do it anyways.
Yes.
Well, then just do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of encouraging people to break the law. But despite what the media says, when you look through crime and statistical records, no one was being put in jail for smoking weed. No one was being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for growing a plant in their backyard or two and using it for personal consumption. Now, if you have garbage bags full and you're selling it to people down the block, you're going to get in trouble.
But don't some of those black pastors tell us that they feel that the marijuana prosecutions were bigoted, they were racist, they were geared toward only the urban community when the war on drugs was going on? White people got away with it, black people
They
didn't.
did. And I think I would love to bring some of them in here to hear their versions and to talk about it, because yes, that's what they shared with us. They shared with us the fact that the kids in the suburbs, parents would hire them a lawyer, but when a door was busted down in the inner city, they would get a public defender who would plead for them and put them in jail.
Wouldn't that quest for justice basically say we should decriminalize all of this?
The problem is if you are still selling this in that urban community, that black community, if you're selling it to the person down the street, the government's allowed to sell it. They're still not allowed to sell it. So they could still be put in jail for selling it themselves. They can grow it and use it and buy it from the government. But the government no different than gambling.
That's interesting, because we had some black law enforcement agents who specialized in this field saying, wait a second, talking against decriminalization, saying, wait a minute, we spent our whole lives knocking down doors in our own communities and dragging people to jail. Now you're going to legalize it so the government can do it. But the government's going to tax it.
Yeah.
So the creative people in our communities are going to say, wait a minute, if I can grow it, I can sell it and sell it cheaper than you can sell it, and we'll still be knocking down their doors and dragging them off to jail.
That's another thing in this New York Times piece that you sent around. This says nearly 3,000 unlicensed cannabis stores are estimated to have opened across New York City since 2021, when a state bill passed legalizing recreational marijuana. So there's 132 licensed places, but 3,000 unlicensed places.
Okay, everyone listening right now he said what? Wait, whoa, let's go back.
Not statewide, only in
New York City. Okay,
yes.
I'm sorry, Alan. If I'm asking the executive producer, could you please repeat that?
Yeah, sure. Nearly 3,000 unlicensed cannabis stores are estimated to have opened across New York City since 2021. And that's when the bill passed to legalize it. 132 are licensed, but 3,000 are unlicensed.
They're all bootleg.
Yeah.
No, it just highlights the example.
How would you prosecute 3,000 unlicensed stores? There's not enough court space. There's not enough paddy wagons.
There's not. But also, the people that were smoking marijuana before 2021 aren't all of a sudden going to say, you know what, I'm not going to go to the neighborhood dealer. I'm going to go to the licensed New York store and get it. All that does is create new users of the product that were spending their money somewhere else. It's economic disaster.
You could shut them down overnight, declare a COVID emergency, and said they're all non-essential. Boom, they're done.
They are essential if they're medicinal.
If they're medicinal, they're essential.
I am half joking.
Okay, but how about the Ohio law that then permits a certain amount of plants to be grown per household?
Per household.
Okay, so now let's think about that. So we talk about the stuff that's being shroomed, if you will.
Yes.
What is that?
Psilocybin.
But it's a PS, isn't it?
Yes,
it starts
it's Greek.
It's okay. Psilocybin. Okay. So the psilocybin and the other things that are trace elements that get people high
which will cause hallucinations in people. It's typically supposed to do that.
Yes, and they're lacing candy bars with this stuff. Right. And there are companies that are legitimately putting these products out in the marketplace, packaged, sealed, and people are selling them.
And this goes beyond even medicinal. A lot of people now are talking about this as a religious or spiritual experiences. They're using this for spiritual contact. They think, I've had people hold up those mushrooms to my face. I was at a neighbor's house. And
Alan,
we were talking
you're
about
making me a little bit uncomfortable right now.
We were talking about God. Wow. We got onto the topics of God, and we're talking about how to be in a relationship with God. He holds up this mushroom and goes, "Do you want to meet him?"
Oh, no. Wow. Well, my head is spinning. It has nothing to do with drugs, believe me. Our conversation has really got everybody going here today. We'll be back on the Public Square. All right, sometimes it's hard to hit the brake pedal here on the public square, but you have to once in a while. But let's hit the gas pedal, and Rob, you're it.
Well, we talked about earlier in the program the boomers and what they bring to the equation.
I apologize. It is our fault.
No,
I'm telling you, it's our fault.
But I think if you talk to educators today, and I talk to my wife obviously all the time, and she talks about now the kids going and vaping the stuff with THC in it, and some of it has no smell, some of it you can't tell what they're doing. Drug use in schools is as high as it's ever been, with the fear that sometimes they are taking or ingesting drugs and they have no clue what really is in there or what it's been laced with. And also the fear of, you talked about the young child that took it, also the fear of the kid that, let's face it, when kids pack lunch nowadays, there's almost gummy bears or something jelly or fruit snacks in every kid's lunch in America.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at these gummies that have THC in them, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if they were just in a bag that you thought was a lunch bag from mom or dad.
Were you the one who brought in a bag of gummies a while ago?
I did. I stopped
this
at
several years ago.
Last year I stopped at a store in Michigan because we were going to vote on in Ohio. I wanted to see for my own eyes what that would look like because I kept hearing these stories. So I went in the store and I was totally blown away that it was, in essence, a convenience store that size with bud, with marijuana, with gummies, with anything you could imagine. And I bought some of them. And the interesting thing is when I bought them, the deal that they gave me, because I was a first-time buyer. They were like a legit drug dealer. They want you to get you hooked. They want to get that. They want to get in the vein. Yeah, they want to give you the best deal.
That scares me. She knows what a nickel bag is.
Yeah.
I repeat, our generation invented the nickel bag.
I bet she knows what a roach clip is, too.
They gave you pre-roll. They gave you all this stuff, and I brought it home. And, I'm like, look at this. And they were all flavored and all this stuff. But it was concerning because I have acquaintances that use this stuff. And when I told them what I got, like, they knew I wasn't going to use it, but they looked at me and they said, if you eat that bag, you're going to be in the closet hiding from the aliens. They're like, be careful if you take any of that because you don't know the dosage you're supposed to take to get started. And I'm like, so I didn't get a crash course when I left.
Rob, please tell me this stuff's out of the studio.
I was going to say, where are the gummies now, Rob?
Yeah.
Where can you tell us where they are?
Disposed of. Yeah, I was going to say, it probably went down Rachel's garbage disposal very quickly.
Okay, good.
It was it was an experiment, and he did call for authorization before he did it because he was traveling through Michigan. And they had legalized first, and so we needed to know how the practice was.
He called Melanie and she said, Jeff, get the dime bag.
You talked about going through the reservations, but now when you go to Michigan, when you cross into Michigan on Route 23, the only thing you see is billboards for weed. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's all.
What kind of confidence does that give you about the capacity of the people of Michigan to do solid voting? Or how about this one? When you look at the Ohio marijuana measure that passed a year ago, the highest concentration of vote yes votes came around the geographical boundaries of the university, Ohio State University. So if this is what the smart people are telling us we should be doing, does anybody know what it means to be a stoner? Have you ever hung around people who do marijuana all the time?
Grew up with them.
And at least, and they say that the marijuana that we grew up with was a lot less potent than the one that we got now. I've never met a genius stoner unless he was maybe a jazz musician who was diminishing his skills.
Well, I know people who are very smart, but they don't seem very smart when they're on it. I'll say it that way.
Yes.
But to me, one of the things, and maybe you talk about the boomer.
Yeah, see, Alan, I'm not suggesting that smart people don't get on it. What I'm suggesting is that this stuff, I'll say it, this stuff eventually makes you stupid.
It dumbs you down. Sure.
Okay. I think that's been my experience.
This seems like there's a loss of even just basic aesthetics as a culture. If you look at pictures of old baseball games, people would have the straw hats on. They're in full suits.
Yeah, and the women in dresses and
Same thing at golf
great.
tournaments.
At a baseball game.
Flying on an airplane.
So even think about the vices of the former time. To call them vice, I'm putting air quotes on radio, as Rob always says. A glass of wine with your family at dinner has a certain aesthetic about it. Even your grandfather smoking a pipe has an aesthetic about it. People like the smell of a pipe. We were taking a walk with the dog, and I was walking with Caleb. We passed someone's house, and they were smoking marijuana. And it was at night, and it was just reeking across the sidewalk. And Caleb goes, "Oh, that stinks. That smells so bad." And then we look across, and we just saw the ember glow at the end of a joint. And we're like, "Oh, they're like 20 feet away from us." And they just heard us say that. But they just heard a 9-year-old say, "That stinks." And there's just something that even the pure aesthetic of it has no culture around it.
Is that why now it's done in candy and baked goods and chocolate bars and everything else? Get rid of the actual product, the smell, the stench.
Maybe, but even that's kind of juvenile. You know, there's something about like a man smoking a cigar that has an appeal. So there's like it's a manliness to it. There's something there. There's just nothing to popping a gummy. And I say this with all due respect to the people that I know that partake of this.
There's two aspects of this that I hope we can get to. And that one is the fact that both of the major party presidential candidates endorse legalizing this.
Really?
Both.
Wow.
It's interesting to hear from Trump because he's like a known straight edge.
Yeah, he doesn't
Right, he
smoke.
doesn't
He doesn't
drink, he
drink.
doesn't smoke.
And he does not advocate the use of drugs. He's been very but for political purposes, his campaign has chosen to take a ambivalent position. They're not campaigning for it, but they're not resisting.
Well, there have been statements where he would sign off on legalizing it at the federal level. I don't know what that means in terms of detail.
Oh, great.
But that's just one aspect.
But now, hang on, to be clear, and I'm not defending Trump. I just want to be clear on the facts. I think it's a compromise on his part, and it's a surprising compromise. And I find it surprising, almost shocking, given his comments and the way that he's raised his children and other things. It looks like political expedience. But I think what I've been reading is that what he's talking about signing off on is if Congress chooses to reclassify marijuana to a lower level of federal restriction.
Well, that's the second half of what I was going to say is either one, regardless of who wins the election, the office of the president cannot come out and legalize anything without consent of Congress.
Right.
The second aspect of this is we're kind of glossing over the psilocybin and the other elements that they're adding into these products. Why can't we, as a society, criminalize those?
I think in many places those are criminalized.
All right, and so, but let's ask. That's a fair question, and we're going to. I think that's a question we've got to get to as far as regulation and new laws, given the new environment. But before we go there, I think we have to. I don't want to miss the point that you mentioned earlier. Enforceability. In New York City, there are 3,000 known operations that are functioning illegally. That would be like saying if prohibition was happening in New York, there were 3,000 speakeasies opening and running in broad daylight, and nobody's doing a thing about it. Now, this is not an environment of prohibition. This is an environment of legalization. But these people have gone saying, thanks for making it legal. Now we're going to do whatever we want to do.
It's the wild, wild west.
And you won't be able to stop us. In other words, maybe it has something to do with the fact that when you spend so much of your time stoned, you stop paying attention to the details.
Right.
Because they're paying no attention whatsoever.
Well, the question was asked.
And they're overwhelming law enforcement.
The question was asked, how do you prosecute that many? My answer would be one at a time. You just go and you start picking away at them, until they realize they're not going to be around long.
Hey, it's time for a break again. I'm sorry, but we have to do this on the Public Square. And for those of you whose station is cutting away at this time, please tune in for the rest of the broadcast online at thepublicsquare.com. Let's continue on with our discussion today here about election issues that we really haven't paid much attention to, some ballot issues around the country. Specifically, marijuana has been the principal topic here today. Alan?
Well, I just want to ask one question. We've all been pretty hard on marijuana right now, which I think rightfully so in many ways. But I do think that, especially post-COVID, a lot of people don't trust the pharmaceutical companies. They look at marijuana as a more natural remedy for pain, something that's been around a long time and something that's a little more holistic. Is there anything to be said for using this substance medicinally?
Well, we have to remember that opium is a natural product also.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that it's natural is not the medical solution, but we need to remember that many, many people have said, if a doctor is prescribing a pain reliever, there are more dangerous pain relievers than marijuana. And so on that basis alone, if the people want to deregulate or decriminalize, if you will, not deregulate, but decriminalize marijuana for the sake of medicinal purposes under a doctor's order, that's fine. But and so a lot of us, including us, said, look, if that's what the people want to do, it's medicine under a doctor's care, and if it's rightly regulated, why? Do you want to be cruel? Do you want people to be in pain who don't need to be in pain? Of course not. Of course not. The only problem was other people said, and watch what's going to happen. Instantly, with the foot in the door, they will move toward marijuana everywhere because this agent, this entity that's behind this is ruthless. And what's now happened in Florida is a perfect example. Florida went for medical marijuana, and now the medical marijuana business is spending $80 million to get it to recreational. It's all a scam.
They'll never stop. They won't just take the one win.
No, because they've got a substance that you can sell and make money on that will addict people. Does anybody remember big tobacco? Did they ever stop until somebody stopped them?
And when it comes to the medicinal aspect in these states, it was not difficult at all to get a medical card to be able to purchase marijuana. So the medicinal aspect was being used and abused by those that wanted to obtain the product to begin with.
And Alan, keep in mind, too, that narcotics are addictive. But a doctor can prescribe a narcotic for whatever medicinal purpose is necessary.
Now, I can hear the industry threatening to sue us and screaming at us saying, our product has not been proven to be addictive. It's marijuana is not addictive.
What?
Okay. I mean,
which product are we talking about?
Yeah. So, and as you can hear the entire nation laughing at the same time. It's the same thing as, like what tobacco said. What? This doesn't, my doctor smokes. Okay.
Yeah. Some of those old ads are so funny.
Yeah. So this is where we're going, right?
I still can't believe people rode on airplanes with cigarettes. That blows my mind every time.
Which brings us to the what do we do about this? Because if there's not a what do we do about this, then this is just despair. This is just frustrating because the stoners are winning. All right. And they may win in this election. That's why it's so devastating, because people's lives are going to be altered, and a lot of them in a horrible way because of this. So we have to look at what happened at the tobacco industry. The tobacco industry changed dramatically, not based on regulation. They always found a way to get past that. But when they began to be brought to accountability for the consequences of their product.
Lawsuits.
This is sadly, but necessary. We now are at the place that if we oppose this, we must move to lawfare. We must move to lawfare. I know that's a terrible word because we see how it's used. But the reality is you have an industry that is dedicated to abuse in the name of pain relief, comfort, or joy, with a downside that is ferocious. They should be held accountable. You say, well, now, wait a second. What about liberty and libertarians? Okay, look, if you're going to get stoned and you keep what you do inside your own house, I got to admit, maybe you have a case. I'm willing to consider that. Once you take what you've done outside your house and you're now on the street where all the rest of us live, we got a problem.
Or behind the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Once you come out of your private domain where your consequences are solely your own, and you try to operate heavy equipment or drive a car or go to work, now we got a problem.
Well, that gets us back to the early story that we were talking about with the babysitter having the gummies on her person, like while she's at work. Like you can't. Can you bring weed to any other job?
All right, and
you certainly shouldn't be able to bring it if you're a babysitter.
What about the tremendous pressure that will be upon corporations and their insurance companies based upon how people coming to work behave based upon using marijuana? We are facing legal ramifications here that are a flipping nightmare.
What about the companies that have to do weekly drug tests, or and the employees can't come to work because of?
And how long before a case goes up before some liberal federal judge and they say it's legal, and I'm being discriminated against because I need this for my personhood, and the judge says, yeah, the company can't fire you because of a drug test on marijuana. How long? How long will it be? You see where we're going? And if you say, and if you think it's any farther than the stretch from going from medical to recreational, I was going to say maybe you're smoking something, but that wouldn't be an appropriate comment right now. Look, this is reality, and they have to be held accountable. And here's the problem. I would like to know, where are the law firms? Where are the lawyers right now? Where are people who are thinking about going into the field of law, who are in the field of law, who would say, wait a second, we can save lives. We can save lives if we can stop this industry, if we can hold them accountable. We can say, well, what about parents holding parties? And some kid brings in a bunch of gummies and the parents have no idea, and 6 people walked out stoned, somebody gets in a car accident and somebody dies. Where's the liability? Where is the liability?
If I think about it, if I'd have thought about it 15 years ago, I would have never dreamed today the number of signs that I see now on premises that says marijuana cannot be smoked here, or legal marijuana cannot be smoked here. But you see them now all the time in restaurants or parks, or
I admire their courage,
or different private places where they're like,
but I'll bet you the industry starts to sue those people. Where is the legal response? Final point. Let's go back to Nebraska. It's conceivable. Remember what I said? The theme is the election no one's watching. Got to say this quick because we're almost out of time. It's conceivable that this presidential election could come down to a 269-269 tie. Go to 270 to win, run the numbers. It's not very hard to show that among the swing states, just start punching blue to red based on the polling, and find out that this could come down to a 269-269 tie, which means that Nebraska could be the determining state. Nebraska is a state that awards you X amount of electoral college votes if you win the state, right?
Yeah, yes.
And then you get an extra one.
Well, yes, then it's divided by congressional districts.
So if you win in the congressional districts, then you get all the electoral votes.
If you win each congressional district, yes.
But let's say that the blue candidate wins but doesn't win in every district, but the red candidate loses the state but wins in that one district, that one vote.
You're going to have a split vote, and you
would
will have
be 270 to 269. That one congressional race in Nebraska could determine the presidency. And what if that race, the turnout in that district, had to do with these ballot issues? The abortion issue or the marijuana issue?
Could that be why Trump's campaign endorsed the issue itself, was because of Nebraska?
I don't know, but it could come down to being that close. So if we don't think ballot issues matter, they matter at every level.
All right, well, let me break in because we have to close the program today. And by the way, we mentioned Nebraska. A shout out to KTLX listeners in 91.3 there. We have listeners all the time tune into the Public Square. Maybe we can hear from some of you this week on this issue. We'd love to. Reach us through thepublicsquare.com, thepublicsquare.com. And thanks for listening to this edition of The Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.